Sci-Hub.
As we all know, the battle for the mobile phone top spot is a difficult one to win. Samsung have recently released their S8 and Apple's iPhone 7 is completely smashing it. Even smaller brands like OnePlus with their new OnePlus 5 are sneaking their way ahead of the pace. So Sony really do have to pull something out of the bag with the new Sony Xperia XZ Premium. Phones generally concentrate on one or two areas where they shine, and Sony has always been about the camera, which to tell you the truth is pretty awesome. First thing to notice about the handset once it's in your hands is its size, and very harsh blocky edges. Sony have strayed away from the current curvy market trends that we've seen on the new Samsung S8 and iPhone 7 alike. It's very square and gives off the business-like impression, as if it was the go-to phone for a typical office worker to have. The issue here is that it looks pretty dated when put next to the more modern curved handsets. There are three colours to choose from, which are a deep sea black, luminous chrome and a bronze pink variation. We were sent the black coloured phone and it's incredibly shiny, and very sensitive to fingerprints. The XZ is covered in glass, giving the phone a premium finish. The top and bottom parts of the handset are strangely made from plastic, which does ruin the aesthetic somewhat. There is Gorilla Glass 5 present to give the phone some kind of protection as well. I have no doubt that you would want to get this phone into some kind of case as quickly as possible. Fingerprints alone will quickly turn this handset into a greasy nightmare. The bezel that surrounds the screen is quite thick too, which I feel is a little unforgiving in this day and age, considering Samsung and Apple are coming out with sleeker looking handsets. Holding the device I have no problem, the square shape isn't enough to put me off. The only problem is the physical size of the handset. There's no way that even someone with the largest of hands are going to be able to reach the top of the screen while using the handset with one hand. The lock and unlock button on the right hand side also doubles as a fingerprint scanner, which does give the phone a sleek look as there is no physical buttons present. It's easy to reach and reacts pretty quickly to your thumb. The volume rocker is just above and again does look sleek. The jack plug for the headphones is placed on top, which I love. It means the headphones can lead away from your pocket nicely if stored upright. The USB-C port has been placed on the bottom in a standard fashion. The whole device has an IP68 rating, which means it will survive a dunk in the bath if you're like me and knock your phone off the side on a regular basis. The screen is a selling point too, coming in at 5.5 inches with a 4K resolution. However, most of the time you're going to be seeing a 1080p downscaled version. 4K resolutions only activate once 4K content has been detected in the media that you're watching. So this means anything from Amazon Prime or even something recorded from the video camera. The reason Sony has opted to do this is because running a 4K resolution on a mobile will destroy the battery life very quickly. Downscaling the resolution ensures the battery life will continue to be spent over the course of a day rather than a few hours. Even still, because of the triluminous screen and 807 ppi, the colours still looked pretty amazing. The specifications are pretty standard for a flagship handset. Inside is a Qualcomm Snapdragon 835 processor with 4GB of RAM. There's even 64GB worth of storage that's available as standard, although there are no other options available. It's a decent size, but this phone advertises 4K pretty heavily. If you're going to be storing a lot of 4K content, then be prepared to have to invest into an extra microSD card. It does support cards up to 256GB. After running a Geekbench 4 session, we can give the final score of 1914 on a single core processor and 6467 on a multi-core processor. Pretty quick considering the Samsung S8 gave us a score of 2015 on a single core and 6413 on a multi-core. Performance was expected. Launching graphically heavy apps were a smooth, quick process and didn't really give us any issues in things like dropped frames or even stutter. The Android 7.1 version that comes with only the handset is only listed with minimal Sony bloatware and didn't really get in the way of my overall experience. The main feature that Sony seems to be using to draw people in is its slow motion capture. One notable change is the increase in frames per second during the slow motion action shots. Usually phones increase their rate to 240 frames per second, but Sony gives you a seriously impressive 920 frames per second. That means that this phone is able to capture so much more detail and quality in its slow motion shots. Pair this with the Sony colorization and impressive sharpness and you've got yourself an amazing video. However, the way you capture a slow motion shot is extremely fiddly and could be enough to put some people off. To activate the slow motion, you have to be recording a standard video. From here, you need to click the dedicated slow motion button to activate the feature. Comparing this to, say, the slow motion timeline on my Samsung S7, capturing certain shots can be a little difficult, especially if they are off the cuff and impromptu. You really need to plan the slow motion shot before actually capturing it. The megapixel count is slightly behind the older Z5, but because of this it means Sony is able to deliver a much better performance in low light settings, although I wasn't too impressed with the still photos, as indoor shots seem a little noisy compared to the camera on a Samsung S8 for example. This camera for still shots does sit on par like something like the older OnePlus 3T or even an iPhone 6. Colours though are still vivid enough to produce some good looking shots when in daylight. The Sony XZ Premium is a pretty solid phone. My only issues with the device is all in its design. There's nothing really wrong with the handset specification at all, and definitely sits on par with other flagship devices in terms of speed, camera quality and even resolutions. It just looks very dull compared to other handsets on the market. But for those wanting a phone that looks very business ready, then this is probably the handset for you.